Hello and welcome to Red Read. Today I want to talk about Bashō, or the complete haiku of Matsuo Bashō. Bashō is, I think, undoubtedly the Japanese haiku master, and even though I don't usually talk about poetry on this channel, mostly because even though I really love poetry and I love trying to seek it out and read as much of it as I can, I don't think that my level of analysis is really that great, at least compared to the people who are making deep reading videos on specific poems. But the reason why I wanted to make a video on this is really to talk about this whole collection, because this is translated, annotated, and introduced by Andrew Fitzsimons, and I think that the complementary annotations that come with each poem are made a whole world of difference with in regards to reading, because there's so much going on with the level of wordplay or the context behind the poems that Bashō wrote that really would have just been completely lost on me if I had just read the English translation. And so I really do recommend this collection because I thought that the annotations were so helpful, and it's going to be a bit hard to talk about, like, obviously I'm not talking about plot or anything, and I'm going to read through and kind of just skim through some of the poems that I've highlighted, which is quite a lot actually, but talk about the difference in perspective between, what I thought a haiku would be and the ways in which it sort of confronted the way that I would normally read a poem. And I guess I can kind of talk about that now. So I think the thing that struck me so much with reading this collection and reading these haiku by the master is how in the English or Western speaking world, really the only thing that people have emphasized or stressed about haiku is the syllable structure. So we've got 5-7-5, and although that does show up, like you'll see haiku written by Bashō that don't fit 5-7-5. I think that there are so many things that are left out or not talked about, especially the idea that there is a seasonal word and the fact that there is a single syllable cutting word, and the placement of that word contextualizes the whole poem, and there's just so much wordplay that's going on that is not talked about as much or not explored as much in the kind of general Western consensus of a haiku. We're just like, oh yeah, it's got this syllable structure. And so what I've realized is that whenever I read haiku that are written in the West or written in English that follow the syllable structure, it feels so different to Japanese haiku, because so much of it uses setup punchline. It's almost written like you can use it to write jokes, but whereas in Japanese they seem to really explore really intense bursts of kind of creativity or perception, or like really leaning into nature, because it has to have a seasonal word in order to be a haiku, and usually drawing contrast between two different things. And what I didn't realize as well is just how much haiku, at least for Bashō, just how much it has literary allusions. And there will be, again, this is where the annotations come in clutch, because it's just like you will read something and you're like, who are the lovers? But it's a reference to an old poem, and it could be an old Chinese poem, it could be an old Japanese poem. But yes, the annotations, they can range from as little as, oh, this is the year and season in which it was written, to like, here's a whole page talking about it. And I will find and read one of them that really stood out to me. But right now I'm just going to go through, I'll read some of my really favorite haiku and just talk about what I got out of them. In terms of the layout, we have the English translation, we have the Japanese in Romaji, and so like Japanese but with English text, and then we have the annotations. And so first one, The autumnal wind through the mouthway of a door points a piercing voice. And, just firstly reading that and just thinking about it, I think that one of the things is if I was to just read a English translation of it, or just read the English text, it would feel like anticlimactic, like, well, what was the point of that? What was the point of that poem? But as the annotations point out, the wordplay is on yarido, or a sliding door, and the homonym yari, a spear. The word kuchi, or mouth, can also mean entrance or door, or entrance or opening. And so we've got we've just got the kind of parallel of wind going through a door and kind of air or breath coming through a mouth, coming through someone's mouth or a voice. And it's just like that is the trend throughout the whole rest of the book. So we'll skip and find some more. Poem number 107. The azure ocean's ripples reeking of sake, tonight the full moon. And this poem plays on the word tsuki, which means moon, but when written in different kanji can mean wine cup. The phrase sokai no nami, or blue seas waves, alongside the image of the autumn moon, derived from a Norplay shari, or the sacred relic. And just like you would have no idea. But the cool thing is that poem is sort of nice and stunning to read in its own right, but just the extra layer or dimension with the literary or theatre allusions just helps out so much. I like seeing that there's a sense of humour that comes through with Bashō, so here's one. Aha, the spring, so wonderful the spring, and the great books say so too. And so he is parodying the words of Mifei in praise of Confucius. And Mifei said, Confucius, great is Confucius. Before Confucius, there was no Confucius. After Confucius, there will be no Confucius. Confucius, great is Confucius. And so that sort of sense of humor comes through with Bashō in definitely some other poems. And I really liked reading the poems in chronological order as well, because you're going through and there will be references to poems that were written for students and pupils, and then those people pass away, and so he writes like funeral poems for them. And it's just really I kind of felt it was great to just go through the story of this guy's life purely through his poems. Here's a nice one, just talking about like contrasting two different elements. Amid the flowers flush the whiteness of my sake, the dark of my rice. And for anyone who knows about zhuangzi and the dream of a butterfly, there are two actually that Bashō wrote, number 172 and 173. And here's the first one. Rise and shine, I want to make you my friend, sleeping butterfly, which I love so much. But then also, butterfly, would I could ask you about Chinese poetry. This is one that I really loved, and I want to read this note out almost in full. This is, firstly, the haiku is, you who listen to monkeys, to this waif in the autumn wind, what would you say? And, like, what does that mean? But let's look at the notes and see. So, Bashō saw a deserted child crying in the autumn wind. He did not hear a monkey's cry. Yet, during the phase of his career that immediately preceded the present journey, he had shown a great deal of interest in Chinese poetry, and it was natural that his grief at hearing a child's cry at this time should remind him of a shrieking monkey. And to the other poets who had been so touched by a monkey's cry, the other Chinese poets, he asked, almost in protest, which of the two cries would sound more pathetic. In other words, he contrasted his genuine pity for the deserted child with the imaginary grief that Japanese poets put in their poems about the monkey's cry. It's also meant that he became aware of a conflict within himself, a conflict between the spirit of fuga, or poetic elegance, which he had hitherto cherished, and the humane feeling of pity aroused by the sight of an abandoned child. And so I'll read that one more time. Read the poem, not the annotations. You who listen to monkeys, to this waif in the autumn wind, what would you say? Wow. Wow. And thank you so much again, Andrew Fitzsimons, for the annotations, because it just has just provided such a new level of depth to my understanding and respect and appreciation for Japanese haiku. And another thing I like just looking at and seeing so many of these poems that are just describing things that seem so obvious, but it's just like, why does, we think that poems have to have a point, that they need to be understood and they need to convey some meaning or convey some message. But what if you could just, in a beautifully succinct way, describe something in nature so like stunningly and beautifully? And I really like that a lot. That will tie into when I find the poem about like the most popular Japanese haiku ever. This is one that I love. The end of the year, wearing a hat, still wearing a pair of sandals. And I love that the annotations for this is just a quote from another person commenting on Bashō's work, which is, "This poem can be said to condense Bashō's entire life." Okay, here is the most popular poem in Japanese of all time, and I know I'm gonna absolutely butcher this Japanese, but I'll read it in English, I'll read it in Japanese as well, and then I will talk about I'll read some of the annotations. So, an olden pond now, a song frog springs off into the sound of water. And in Japanese, it's Furuike ya kawazu tobi komu mizu no oto. And so that's his most celebrated poem. It's the single most famous poem in Japanese literature. And it got me thinking. I was like, okay, in the West, what is the most famous line of literature? Because it's probably to be or not to be. That is the question. It could be, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. Like, that is a line from literature. But I just thought, what does it do to what does it do to the cultural aesthetic of society when the most popular line that everyone knows and has just become proverbial is about a frog jumping into a pond? This one doesn't even have annotations because it is just understandable on a surface level, but it's still really beautiful. Even a long day can never be long enough for the skylark's song. Yeah, don't be afraid to just describe cool shit in nature. It's like, write a poem about it. This is two that really strike so hard. So Rika is the man who gifted Bashō the tree, the banana tree, from which he got his pen name. And these are two poems mourning Rika's wife. The futon pulled up over the head, the freezing night's desolation. And a second one, this is at a memorial. This next one is not about Rika's wife, it's about Rakugo's son. And Rakugo, I think, was a disciple. The brazier's banked ashes extinguishing to the hiss of your tears. Which is, that was one that really stood out as feeling almost like different, very personal and very kind of grounded in like a human action, whereas a lot of Bashō's poems are about nature. Another poem that I think conveys how just reading poems can change the way that you physically see the world. Islands and islands, 1,000 pieces shattered on the summer sea. And just this idea of like, we would look, it's just a shift in perception that we look and we might see islands in the ocean as kind of separate entities, but just thinking of them as shattered pieces, shattered like parts of a whole. I thought it was also a cool limitation that, so haiku need to have a season word, and I thought that it would be something like you would just use the word ame for rain or something. But even like some of the seasonal words, hototogisu, the cuckoo's cry, that takes up an entire line. And I think it's cool that there are, already within the tight constraints of Japanese haiku, the fact that the season word takes up an entire line is like an even more of a barrier. And so it's still amazing how stunning some of these poems can be. with all of these limitations. And just one lucky last one to finish off. In Kyoto too, a yearning for Kyoto, kaku kakuing. And so the second kyo, or is considered to refer to the Kyoto of the past. The kaku is emblematic of nostalgia in Japanese poetry. And I think that's where I will finish off. I really want to just stress how great and how thankful I am that I got this collection, and I really appreciate Andrew Fitzsimons' translations and his annotations. If you want to get into the works of Bashō, I really recommend this collection. I love this so much, and I've taken so many annotations for poems that I want to go back and reread. Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I will see you in the next one.